everyone. My name is Shayda Torabi, and I am the co-founder and CEO of RESTART CBD. I am super excited to be joining Austin Women as a Women to Watch, and super honored to be here answering some expert questions and hopefully giving y'all a little bit of an insight into my day-to-day and my journey and my story and how I got here. My hope with sharing my story is to inspire you. I definitely think that we all bring something unique to the table, and by being able to lean into our strengths and our passions and kind of finding the magic in the middle, that is where we will find both happiness and success in our careers and lives. So I'm going to kick things off. I have a few questions that I'll be answering today and encourage you as you're listening to me, if anything is striking a chord, please feel free to reach out. I'm going to share my social handles throughout the presentation and just really want to connect with y'all. I am a born and raised Austinite. I love this city. I love this community that we're building. And so it brings me so much joy to be able to connect with other like-minded women who are aspiring to explore and level up through their careers. So without further ado, I'll kind of kick things off. But the first question is, how did you get your start? So I think for me, it's really important to kind of set the tone and share a little bit of, the whole journey that I've been through. I did mention I am a local Austinite. Yes, I was born and raised in Austin. I did all my schooling and education here in Austin. And so I was very fortunate to get a degree at Concordia University. And I actually went back to Concordia after my undergrad and got my master's. So I have an undergrad degree in communications and marketing, as well as a master's in business. And for me, the important takeaway from that experience was really just finding things that I was really passionate about and kind of stoking that fire through, just being creative. And so I was very fortunate that my school provided a lot of opportunities for me to explore that creativity. So because I majored in communications, I of course took classes on public relations and editing videography and other components. My school campus had a radio station. I actually had a radio show when I was in college. And so for me, again, just kind of being in an environment that allowed me to explore that creativity certainly helped lay that foundation. So went to school for communications and marketing. And when it came time to getting a job out of college, I was really fortunate because I was able to have some internships that gave me a lot of good experience, obviously in the real world. And so if you're in Austin or you like live music, you're probably familiar with Austin City Limits Festival produced by C3 Presents. I was really fortunate. One of the C3 graduates, Charles Attal, he is actually a graduate from Concordia, and he came and spoke to one of my classes, and I was able to secure an internship with him where I was able to get this front row experience to producing experiential events. And I think for me, that was so important because as a marketer, I love the opportunity that marketing and communications really creates, whether it's in person at an event and being able to leave an impression on someone or make them feel a certain way, or whether it's through digital and content creation, what someone is seeing on the other side of that screen. Those different touch points are really important to me and something that I'm really, considerate of and also really passionate about creating. And so getting that experience for live music, festival production, experiential marketing was definitely really eye-opening. And it just gave me this really passionate kind of purpose to want to do more of that. I was really fortunate to also leave that internship to go be an intern for the state of Texas. I don't know if y'all know this, but they have a Texas music office. And so the whole department is really encouraging to help create and keep Texas music alive. And so if you can't tell, I really love live music. I feel like I am the example of Austin, live music capital of the world. I grew up going to concerts and shows. And so again, I share these things because I think that the beauty of kind of learning from someone else's story is not to emulate it or imitate it, but to find your own, journey or voice through someone else kind of speaking up and sharing theirs. So you obviously come from a very unique and specific background that has laid out a very nice, pathway for your journey. So this is just me getting to reflect on mine a little bit. And growing up in live music, I never thought that I would necessarily like translate that into what I'm doing today. But again, for me, it was just being curious and kind of leaning into these creative marketing and really experiential marketing and branding moments. And so I was really fortunate to have those experiences. And then that led into me getting my first job out of college. So, y'all also might be familiar with a company called WP Engine. They are a managed WordPress host. I know, super sexy, say that 10 times. Of course, when I was graduating college, I wanted to work in live music. That was the big dream. And I think if I had gotten hung up on sticking like explicitly to that, I probably would be in a completely different path and journey, of course, but also I don't know if that would have necessarily been the best for me. And so I'm a really big spiritual person, and I believe that life unfolds in the way that it does, and to just be really grateful and kind of show up for that moment and that occasion. And so that's what I did. And so I was not getting hired in the live music industry, but I went to this hiring fair and WP Engine was there. And I used to be a music blogger kind of on the side, kind of highlighting different shows and things I was going to just for like kind of college courses and projects and things like that. And so I had this WordPress experience that when I met WP Engine at this hiring event, they were like, yeah, we definitely like that you have WordPress experience and you have a marketing background. Like, do you want to work for us? Little did I know that I was joining a startup, a very small startup. I was actually employee 13. So if you can imagine a startup environment, now reflecting on who WP Engine is, especially in the Austin community, they've built a really great brand name for themselves. And part of that was my help and my expertise. So I joined them as employee 13, and I actually scaled with the company for 6 years. I was their event manager. I got to travel all over the world and really help connect our brand to our customers. And so, of course, in the beginning, we were a no-name brand and nobody knew who we were. So we were sponsoring things and, creating different customer touch points, whether that was digital or in person, creating content, but getting to be a part of that team that was helping bring that to market, and then watching as the brand became more known and more popular, and people were like, I know who you guys are. Like, that felt really good to be a part of the team who was helping to like bring that brand to market. And so simultaneously, while I was helping build WP Engine's brand, I also was building my own personal brand. And I, again, at the time, like didn't really know what I was doing necessarily, but I was leaning into the opportunities that were in front of me. And something that has kind of, led me very well throughout my life has been to just show up, to like be really eager and really excited and really passionate, and just like try, like what's the worst that can happen. So another kind of motto and mantra I say is, if you don't ask, the answer will always be no. And so I started leaning into public speaking, of course, experienced a ton of imposter syndrome, but just kept doing it, like just kept being uncomfortable and putting myself in those positions. And it kind of led me to where I'm presently at today. So, got to have that experience building WP Engine. I left them and became director of marketing for a digital agency kind of during that time. Also, to bring up how I founded my own company, I got exposed to CBD because in 2015, I was in a car accident. So I was hit by a vehicle as a pedestrian in downtown Austin, and I fractured my pelvis in 2 places. And I don't say that to like make you feel like sorry or sad for me. I say it to say, again, life is going to happen and things are going to, push you or pull you in a particular direction. And it's like how you kind of react to that, that I think is where you can really overcome and overpower that negativity that might get someone else down. And so for me, yes, the accident was super unfortunate, but that accident opened up a dialogue really with my mother. So I love cannabis, to be really transparent and honest. Yes, I live in Texas and I like to consume in legal states when I visit them. But I had no idea what CBD was. There was no market for this. So when I was recovering from my accident, my mother actually is the one who introduced me to CBD. But again, in 2015, 2016, there really wasn't a market. And so while I found a lot of personal relief with helping me manage my pain and anxiety and inflammation, it wasn't something that there was really a market opportunity to go launch a brand. So I mentioned that just to kind of punctuate it there, but I tucked it away because I actually ended up going and being director of marketing for this digital agency. I worked for them for about a year before ultimately deciding to bring Restart CBD to life. And so we launched Restart in August. We launched Restart in August of 2018. And I was really fortunate because I launched the brand with my younger sister, Sydney. And now in 2019, we incorporated my littlest sister, Nika, into the team. And so we launched as one of the first brands in Texas to open a CBD brick and mortar. And let me tell you, there was really no one else doing it. It was super wild, wild west. I mean, cannabis in general is super wild, wild west, but we really just felt with our personal experience, our passion for this plant, and just our ability to tell a story and to go to market with something was just this kind of perfect storm, and we were able to lean into it. So that's kind of a high level, but timeline of how I kind of got started. Again, just to kind of reiterate, I love marketing. I love communication. I love creating content. And that was kind of my role throughout all these different companies that I worked for. And also, while I obviously worked for WP Engine, I was watching them build their startup. So it was giving me this front row experience to how do you go and bring something to life? And again, gave me a really great opportunity when it came time for me to launch my company. I had a really good foundation for understanding what some of those tools and levers and mechanisms were that I was going to need to take my brand and product to market. What is the thing that you love most about your field? For me, I am a professional. I do come from a corporate technology background. I also come from a kind of professional curriculum background. I like to think that I am a nice put together, young woman, and I have a voice and I love using it. And I think that the biggest thing with cannabis is there's just a lot of stigma around it. There's a lot of, culture shaming. There's a lot of criticism around who consumes and who should consume cannabis. But cannabis is going mainstream. And I think that it is just proving the efficacy and the viability of this plant. It is a plant at the end of the day, and it's a really powerful plant. And so, yes, I operate my business on the CBD side. For those of you who don't know, CBD is a federally legal cannabinoid. It's a federally legal product. This industry that I operate out of is federally legal, and it's also Texas state legal. Texas also had to go vote and legalize hemp for retail and growing and, all this different processes around this industry that we're creating. And so for me, I think the biggest thing that I love is, again, just being able to destigmatize it, whether it's through conversations like this with fellow Austin women, whether it's through the conversations I'm able to have in my retail storefront. For me, being able to bring a high quality product to market, as well as wrap that in confidence for the consumer. My whole end goal is to make you more canna curious. You don't want to get high, that's okay. If you are looking for pain relief, we have products for that. If you're looking for something to just take the edge off and make you feel a little bit chill, I have a product for that. And so being able to help customers and walk them through these different products, these different understandings around cannabis, how cannabis interacts with our bodies and our unique biochemistry, is really a rewarding experience and position that I get to hold. And so for me, that is something that I really love about what I get to do every day. I get to wake up and I get to help communicate the value of cannabis through my brand and my business that I get to build with my family. So it's a really, really great opportunity. I feel really blessed to be in this position to be doing that. But of course, it is a little uncomfortable sometimes because we are embarking into the new. And so, kind of one of the follow-up questions to that is, what is something that you've had to overcome? And I think for me, reflecting on the past 3 years of being in business and just kind of being, a young professional with my work experience prior to launching Restart, a lot of the industries that exist have been in existence for many years, decades. And so when you look at cannabis, we are such a new industry that, if I'm being really honest, part of why when I discovered CBD for my own relief during my accident, there wasn't really a market. So I didn't really have anybody that I could go educate me about. So my mother brought it to me. I was like, oh, this is weed. This is marijuana. I'm good. I'm familiar with that. And I just kind of dismissed it. And I think that I share that because to reflect on, if you can understand, this industry is so new. And so there isn't a ton of education on cannabis. There's especially not a lot of information around CBD, this non-psychoactive cannabinoid. And so that bleeds into the research that's being done, it being compared to pharmaceuticals, this, that, and the other. And so as a small business owner trying to go bring a product to market, anybody, I'm sure if you're listening and you're also a small business owner, you're probably yeah, being a small business owner is challenging. There's a lot of things to overcome. But for me, the part that I reflect on the most is like leaning into launching a business and kind of looking around and looking for people that I could emulate or kind of learn from or copy or like take a note from here or there. And the reality was that CBD as a market was so new that there literally was nobody really doing this in Texas, in Austin. And so I quickly learned that I don't need to look for other people for guidance. Like, yes, we did a ton of research on the product. We did a ton of research on the current status of the industry. We looked at competing industries, so kind of paralleling, health and wellness, a little bit into pharmaceuticals, more into like supplements, also looked at food and beverage just because you do consume cannabis, what do labels say, what are kind of FDA warnings. But other than that, there really wasn't a lot of like, oh, here's a brand that is doing a great job. And like, how do I niche it and make my own brand? Like, there was none of that. And so, a lot of our early months and even like first year, probably year and a half, was us being like, we're looking around and then we're realizing, oh my gosh, we're the leader. Like, we're the ones that everybody's, kind of like watching. And so that gave us a lot of, challenges to overcome, but in the end it also gave us a lot of opportunity. And so like for me, the kind of like tip to take away is just to trust yourself. Like, definitely do the homework, do the research, do the market research, understand exactly what you're getting into, but at the same time, like, you also just kind of have to pull the trigger, you have to lean into it. And so for us, we just very much leaned into it. And I think that it's very apparent in the brand that we've built. We just won the Best of Awards by Austin Chronicle. So we are officially the #1 CBD brand in Central Texas. In addition to my brick and mortar store here in Austin, I also ship my products nationwide through my e-commerce website, restartcbd.com. So like navigating a national brand on top of like all the regulations and everything, those are also things that I have to kind of face and navigate and overcome. But genuinely, it's been super rewarding being able to lean into being kind of in this new industry and helping shape it. And I think that for those listening, again, kind of like being comfortable with the uncomfortability, like, it's okay to not know everything. And you should just like dive in head first and kind of like iterate as you're going. So hopefully that gives you some encouragement for anybody who's especially curious about kind of like getting into the cannabis industry. I think that, in reality, nothing is new and everything can be repeated. And so it should give you some hope of like, I can make something. And if you have a great story and you have a great, plan of action, I think that anything can be implemented. And the other kind of final tip is consistency is key. Just like keep plugging at it. Like, if you run into a challenge, like, figure it out, try another door, like figure it out, like try again the next day. Like, don't let it defeat you. Just use it as fuel to keep pushing forward. So the next question is, what is something I wish I knew 5 years ago? So I think for me, reflecting on my career, especially when I started, I kind of mentioned in the beginning imposter syndrome really briefly. I think we all can like be that version of ourselves. It doesn't matter how confident we are. I'm sure you're listening to me and you might think, wow, she's so articulate and she's so accomplished. But like, don't let that fool you. Every day I have moments of weakness and I have to constantly remind myself that I'm worthy and I deserve it. And like, if they can have it, like, so can I. And it kind of reflects back on the consistency comment of my previous answer. But really for this one, it's about just like, you don't know what can happen if you don't do it. And so I remember kind of launching my career at WP Engine, and I was going to all these events for our business. I was really fortunate to get to travel a lot in my career, but I would be at these conferences, standing at a booth, talking to our customers. But I saw this opportunity where people were speaking at these conferences and they were developing these personal brands and they were becoming these experts on these subjects and these topics. And I just remember thinking, like, well, that would never be me. That can't be me. Like, how do I get on a stage? Like, I've never spoken on a stage. And I just remember I had this one coworker who was like, why not you? Like, just apply, see what happens. Like, if they tell you no, then that's a no. But if you don't apply, like, you don't know. And I'm so grateful for that coworker, because if I would have deselected myself, then I wouldn't be where I am today. Y'all, I have spoken at over probably 100 different in-person, large conference, one-on-one panels, virtual events, Zoom conferences. And it's all because I took that first step. And if I let that experience deter me and turn me off from it, I probably wouldn't be here today. So, again, maybe you don't love public speaking, maybe that's not your jam, but the point of this story is to really just pick something and start doing it. Like, why not you? Why can't you be whatever it is that you want to do? And when you're here, kind of present in this position, you'll look back on you when you did that decision, you took the plunge, you said yes, and you'll be like, why was I so afraid to do that? Why did I get in my own way? And so if I can just be any sort of encouragement to, again, lean into that uncomfortability and just like take that next best step forward, I think that that is where you're going to, find yourself living your truth out loud. The person that I am today is exactly who I know that I'm supposed to be. But damn, me 5 years ago definitely didn't know that I would be here. But I'm really glad that me back then decided to take a chance and to lean into being uncomfortable. And it's through those uncomfortable moments that you grow and shape yourself into the woman that you want to become. Question is, what advice would I give someone who wants to get into cannabis? So it is a little bit of the wild, wild west. So don't be, afraid to kind of like figure out where you can add the most value. There's definitely aspects of the industry that, you know, are a little bit saturated. But I think, again, for me, reflecting on my own personal journey, it's leaning into your strengths. If you are someone who is super analytical and you love data, like finding a way to plug in that experience into the cannabis industry is going to not only serve the industry the best, but it's ultimately going to serve you the best because you're doing something that you love. So like if you don't love marketing, don't be like, well, I got to go find a brand and do all this marketing for them. Like that's not going to make you happy at the end of the day. And another philosophy that I try to live by is lean into your strengths because you can hire for your weaknesses. So for us as a brand, my sisters and I, we all love creating content. That's definitely in our wheelhouse. But there are certain areas that we don't have the time or don't have the patience for. A good example of that is, despite being a marketer, I don't spend a ton of time doing email marketing, but email marketing is a super critical component of the cannabis industry, especially when it comes to marketing, because we cannot market on traditional marketing and advertising avenues. Like we can't really market ourselves with ads on Facebook or Instagram like other small businesses. So again, kind of knowing those challenges, figuring out ways that you can either hire around it or ways that you yourself can add value. Another thing I love to highlight is ancillary businesses. The cannabis industry needs ancillary businesses and professionals. I'm talking accountants, lawyers, people who can support the industry without having to directly be in the industry. And kind of the final point on that too is just educate yourself. I think that that is like the most important thing, especially in a new industry like cannabis. There's a lot of misinformation flowing out there. And if you can be the type of person who just like shows up curious and like wants to be plugged in and has a genuine passion and heart for it, like you're going to find a way to find a role in the industry and be successful because you're genuinely trying to pursue something that you have a passion with. If you don't have a passion for something, it's going to be very clear. And if you're just trying to kind of, I know there's a saying like fake it till you make it, but I think in the cannabis industry, because it's dealing with consumer safety and, quote unquote, like cannabis, you definitely want to know what you're getting into. You want to understand there's so much of my job that requires dealing with compliance and the law and regulation. And so if that's something that you're like, I love, lean into it, learn it. It'll be your best friend and it will serve you very well. And if that's something that you're like, you know what, I don't really know if that's like my passion, find another way to be a part of the industry. Again, like I said, there's so many ways that you can be involved in so many different aspects of value that you can provide to the industry. And so just kind of like reflect and lean on that. But the final kind of like wrap up to this, I really want to thank you for taking, a couple moments out of your day to sit down with me and learn a little bit more about my story. Like I said, we are here, my sisters and I, to just like help destigmatize and professionalize cannabis, to be a friendly voice in the conversation, to create different touch points for our consumers and our customers and our community to better understand this plant. Whether you shop with us in person, you can come see our retail store. We are in North Austin by the Domain. We are open 6 days a week, every day except Sunday. If you want to shop with us online, whether you're in Austin or anywhere else in the United States, we do ship our products nationwide, and you can shop us at restartcbd.com. We also create a ton of educational content. If you are someone who, yes, obviously you're listening to my personal story and my professional story, but you're like, I'm actually curious about cannabis and I need more education, feel free to slide into our DMs. We're on Instagram at Restart CBD. We have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/Restart CBD, and we're constantly creating educational content and would love to answer your questions one-on-one. I also am the host of a cannabis marketing podcast. I didn't necessarily touch on that too much, but for me, that's kind of one of the avenues and ways that I've been able to lean into kind of the experience that I've gone through in my life. I mentioned early that I did a radio show in college. And so being able to, see that come full circle and really be able to put my skills to use by creating this podcast. I launched it a year ago in the middle of the pandemic and have produced about 58 episodes now at this point. I've been very, very, very grateful to have some amazing guests. My podcast has national reflection on the cannabis industry, specifically cannabis and marketing. So again, trying to help kind of like lean into that professionalizing cannabis conversation, but it's very educational as well. You can check me out every Monday with a new episode. The link is tobeblunt.buzzsprout.com. The podcast is called To Be Blunt. You can find the podcast on Instagram at To Be Blunt Pod, and really anywhere you listen to podcasts, you can catch the podcast episodes. And finally, my name is Shayda Torabi, and I am able to be found on the web at theshaydatarabi.com. You can see a little bit more of the work that I've done and the personal brand that I've built. And probably my most active personal channel that I'm on is at the Shayda Torabi. Again, thank you so much for the time. Thank you, Austin Women, for having me as a woman to watch. I appreciate this opportunity and this accolade so much. It means so much. Another just step in that validation of helping professionalizing and destigmatizing cannabis. And thanks to you. Thanks to you for listening. Thanks for clicking play on this video. I hope that it was informational for you. Most importantly, though, I hope it was inspirational for you. Again, my takeaway is always that, you can see something that is actionable for you in your day-to-day life. And so I'd love to connect with you. Please reach out on one of my social channels. I'd love to continue the conversation and answer any questions that you may have. So I will talk to you offline. Bye, y'all.